Hey, and welcome back to Thursday Night Live with Soaring Profits, where we interview the most delightful and interesting, motivated people that we can find for you, just so you can hear about their short stories and get motivated as well. I don't know if you remember a couple of weeks ago, we had the wonderful Rhonda on, and she talked all about Achilles Canada. Achilles Canada was founded in 1999 by Brian McLean, who is an athlete and marathon runner with both a hearing and visual impairment. Brian, through his friendship with Dick Traum, the first amputee to ever run the New York City Marathon, they realized there was a need to support athletes with both mental and physical challenges in Canada. So he followed the example of Mr. Dick Traum, who started the first benevolent organization for athletes with disabilities in the state of New York, United States. Brian experienced and realized the need to create opportunities to help athletes with disabilities compete in athletic events, both locally and globally. In this realization, the lives of thousands of physically challenged athletes were improved through the benevolent athlete programs that is now known from coast to coast in Canada as Achilles Canada. And Brian is with us tonight. We've been talking to him in the green room and learning a little bit about him. He is a delightful person, just like Rhonda said, motivated, a runner himself, an athlete in his own right. And Brian, on this show, we're always interested in what motivates people to do stuff. Creating an organization like Achilles Canada is no small feat. It's a huge organization, as it says, coast to coast. What brings you from being an athlete yourself, running, trying to compete yourself with your own, the things that would hold back other people, but you just overcame? Then you go beyond that and you start something that will help other people. What motivates you to do that?
Well, thank you, James and Pat, for inviting me to be a part of this show. It's a life of an opportunity, a lifetime achievement, I feel like. But James, it all started like all my life growing up as a kid. I've always been heavily involved in sports. So I played everything: football, hockey, golf, and running. I was a bit of a runner. I was never into track and field. I was not fast enough, but I enjoyed running just to stay healthy and fit. But I do have a visual impairment. So I have a disease called retinitis pigmentosus. Short form is RP. And right now I'm down to, believe it or not, 1% vision left. So I'm legally blind, and I always tell people, make a pinhole with your two fingers and put them up to your eyes, and basically that's what I see. So it's like tunnel vision. I have no peripheral vision whatsoever. So even an everyday walk for me is a challenge because I cannot see where my feet are landing. And so just to give you an example, so if I'm coming up to a corner and there's a curb there, I don't know if I need to step down or step up because I can't see it.
Right.
I also suffer from hearing loss. So basically, I've always worn a hearing aid in my right ear since I was 5 years old. But as I've gotten older, my left ear got weaker, and now I wear hearing aids in both ears.
Wow.
So that's my disability. But I'm a sports fanatic, and I never say no. So even though I have limitations with my vision and hearing, I never say no because I just love to get involved in everything. So to give you an idea in terms of how Achilles Canada started, is that I was still a runner, but I didn't have the confidence to run outside by myself. Because when I was running outside by myself, I always ran into fire hydrant, or I would run into another person who was on the sidewalk.
Right.
Occasionally, I have run into light poles. It's not a pleasant experience.
Right.
So I had to give up running outside. So I used to run 5 miles a day on a treadmill. And that's what I did. So every day I would run 5 miles on a treadmill because I felt safe and I could continue on with my running. And I had a good friend of mine who was running the New York City Marathon. And he went down to do the New York City Marathon. And while he was running, he saw all the disabled athletes, various disabilities, wheelchair, visual impairment, blind athlete, you name it, almost every single disability was showcased within the New York City Marathon. And he saw this, and I wasn't even aware of it at that time. And when he came back to Canada, he and I, we got together and he told me about this. And he said, Brian, you need to look into this. And he did find out that the name of the organization down in New York was Achilles International.
Okay.
And he said, you know what, you need to look into this and, maybe incorporate it, here in Canada. And sure enough, that's what I did. So I started doing some research. I discovered that this gentleman named Dick Traum, who was an amputee runner himself, was the very first amputee to do the New York City Marathon in 1976. What's really interesting is that he is the gentleman who inspired our famous Terry Fox to do his Marathon of Hope. So to give you an idea, when Terry was getting his leg amputated in the hospital, his brother Daryl showed him an article out of Runner's World about this guy, Dick Traum, doing the New York City Marathon, because Dick Traum himself is an amputee runner with only one leg.
Wow.
I got to tell you that Dick Traum was a little bit on the so-called heavy side. He wasn't a fit individual. He was a little bit on the heavy side, but he completed the New York City Marathon. And if you ask Daryl Fox, he will say that when he showed the picture of Dick Traum in the article to his brother Terry said, along this line, if this guy can run a marathon, I could run a marathon myself. And sure enough, that's how I'm not going to say he got Terry. I'm not going to say he got inspired or that's where he got his dream to run across Canada. But that's how it evolves a bit. After Terry did his Marathon of Hope and passed away, then we had the Terry Fox Foundation formed. So Dick Traum and his team down in New York, they actually helped the Terry Fox Foundation for the first 3 years of its existence to get its worldwide famous Terry Fox run.
Wow.
So that's a little bit of the Canadian connection that we have between Canada and the American. So sure enough, I got inspired because Terry Fox is one of my idols, here in Canada. I'm sure many other people across Canada will totally agree that, Terry Fox is a phenomenal, famous individual here in Canada. So I just, picked up the phone one day, got a hold of Dick Traum and said, hey, Dick, I'd love to meet you. I want to chat about what we can do here in Canada. And so he invited me to come down and meet with him in New York. So sure enough, I spent a weekend down in New York. We chatted. And through a simple handshake, he said, you know what, Brian, you run Canada for me. And that's where I took it. So I started back in 1999, going 26 years strong. And we have a database of over 800 Achilles athletes. And when I use the term Achilles athlete, these are people with either a physical or mental disability right across Canada. And it's a simple goal. All I want to do is help as many people with a disability get off the couch, get out of your home, and start on if you're not a runner, I get it. Just start on a simple walking program and let's improve, increase, get better at it, start running, and tell me what your goals are, and we'll get you there. And you'd be amazed that in 26 years, the number of first-time runners, and I say first-time runners because they usually started off on a walking program with us, and now they've become runners, have started, from basically nothing, accomplished their first 5K, 10K, half marathon, and some of them have done marathons now, ultra marathon, and we even have a handful of athletes who have even qualified for the Paralympics. So it's just phenomenal, and I can't say enough about what we do here in Canada. And this gentleman, Dick Traum, has certainly inspired me to continue my passion of running and continue my passion in helping motivate, inspire as many people with a disability to get off the couch. Because I myself, hey, I'm legally blind, hearing impaired, but I'm not going to allow that to stop me from doing what I love.
Well, Brian, I think that's fantastic. First of all, again, thank you for joining us tonight. I'm running into a little bit of tech stuff here with the internet where I keep freezing. I apologize to everyone out there that's looking at that. I apologize for that. But Brian, obviously you get pulled into this foundation. You start with Achilles Canada 26 years ago, like you were saying. But not only the athlete side of this is that you've created a support network for individuals helping the athletes to be able to mobilize themselves and get out there and do that. If you can speak a little on that, if you don't mind as well.
Yeah, good point, Patrick. You're absolutely right, because, I have been focusing on the disabled athlete, but what we forget is the running guide or guide runner. And I'll give you an idea. So now I'm able to run back outside. I no longer run on a treadmill anymore because personally, I don't like running on a treadmill. It's just too boring, and I'd rather be outside in the fresh air and see what I can see. But in order for me to run outside, I need a guide runner. And I use a tethered rope between myself and my guide runner. So it's up to my guide runner to be my eyes and ears and to let me know where we're going and take it from there. Like that's how I get around. So funny story, that's how I met my wife. My wife was a guide runner. Called me one day and said, "Hey, Brian, I want to help out disabled athlete." And I just happened to tell her, "Well, you know what? I've got a race coming up and I don't have a guide runner. How would you like to guide me?" She said, "Yes." And we did a 5K race together. And honestly, the gun went off at the start of the race. And within the first 200 yards, she took me out on a pylon. Okay, and I stumbled, tripped on the pylon, fell on the ground, first, got up, and she was so embarrassed. She wanted to quit, and, it was just unbelievable. But I said, okay, forget it. It was just an accident. Let's get going. And so we continued on the race, and we finished it, and I know she felt real bad, but believe it or not, I had a crush on her. It was great. I pursued her, and within a couple of years, we got married, and it was just fantastic. So I just really
takes tying the knot to a whole new level, doesn't it, Brian? That's awesome.
Yeah. And then
I got a question here from one of our ladies down in Texas, and she's asking you if you.
Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to say is that when I do a marathon, as we all know, a marathon is either 26 miles or 42 kilometers.
Right.
So it's not easy. I'm about a 4-hour, 4.5 hour average marathon time to complete the marathon. But when I run a marathon, I always start with 3 running guides.
Right.
The reason why I start with 3 running guides is, again, because we're talking about 42 kilometers. That's a lot of work for one running guide to continue on communicating with me, throughout the race. So I usually start the race with 3 running guides. I hold a tethered rope with one. One running guide will be running in front of me, and I will follow his or her behind. And that individual will also let all the other runners know, saying blind runner coming up.
Okay.
The third guide is just basically a floater for the time being, because you will mix it up. Every 10K, you'll change it up. The third running guide will often be the one going to the water station, getting us Gatorade or water, whatever we need. And then they change it up. So I've completed 11 marathons to date and started all 11 marathons with 3 running guides, but I've yet to cross the finish line with all 3. So during the course of the marathon, I've lost 1 or 2 of them, but fortunately I've had that one last guide runner who was able to get me to the finish line, which, as we all know, is the most important thing. So that's where the running come in.
So what kind of things do they tell you while you're running? Like, so Rhonda kind of went over a little bit of it, but like you said, there's a lot of things going on in a race, especially all the people there, because they're huge races. And then there's often water bottles and cups and all sorts of odd things just on the road. And then there's potholes and changes in levels. And like, how does someone guide you through that?
Well, good question, James. And when I run, I'm not a talker. So my guide runners are usually the ones that end up doing all the talking. I like to stay focused and just get, what I got to do in front of me. But it's up to the guide runner to let me know. So if we're in a marathon, he or she needs to tell me what the terrain is like. What are the conditions? So if we're on a road, great. But you know what? We might come up, certainly here in Toronto, we might come up to some streetcar track, maybe even a manhole. So it's up to the guide runner to let me know, hey, we're coming up to a manhole or we're coming up to some railroad track. Be prepared. It's also up to the guide runner to say, hey, we're going to be turning left or right. I have no idea if we need to turn left or right. And again, even with the slow runners in front of me, the guide runner will inform me, hey, Brian, we're going to pass this runner on the left or the right. And that's how we usually do it. You're right. When it comes to the water station, it can be very slippery. And I've actually fallen on manholes that were just covered with water. It gets slippery. But, I have fallen numerous times. And all I do is just get right back up and say, okay, guys, let's keep on going. And that's it. So it's been great.
Can you tell us a little bit about the tether? Like, so I know it's a rope. It's like a elastic band, or is it? And how does that work?
Yeah, I use a simple mountain rope. So mountain rope. My rope is about 4 feet long. Okay, so at the beginning of the race, we usually tighten up the rope. Or if it's so crowded during the race, I will actually take my guide runner by the elbow. Okay, and it's up to he or she to take it from there. Then if there's some open space, then we can spread out on the tethered rope, because even with my limitation, I love to run free. And so I do feel free when I'm at the end of the rope and there's a 4-foot gap between myself and my guide runner. It's funny. I did my very first marathon with the New York City Marathon back in 1999, and I didn't know anything about tethered rope. And I had 3 guide runners, and I thought I'd be okay in a crowd of 40,000 runners. So I actually ran the entire marathon with my hand on top of my guide's shoulder.
Wow.
It was just so crowded. It never opened up for me to allow to run on my own. And that was my wake-up call saying, well, man, I can't do this anymore. So I got to come up with another alternative. And that's where I came up with the tethered rope idea. And it worked out well, really well.
That's amazing. Now, I think it's incredible what you've done. Like, all these stories that you're telling are unbelievable. Like, I haven't done a marathon yet. I plan on doing one soon, but I've done half marathons. And in the beginning, it is so tight. You have people walking, you have people running, I could not even imagine trusting myself to another person. Now, so we talked a little bit with Rhonda, and she had, I believe, 50 people or 25 people. I don't remember. I have a bad memory. Help her, and you helped her get some of those people to run the Bruce Trail. And she was talking about how some of those people she had never, ever met before. Is this what happens? Like, when you go to a marathon, is this someone you practice with? Or is this like they show up and go, well, how do I guide you? Like, how does that work out? How do you match runners with their, what do you call the people that help?
Guide runners.
Guide runners. So how do you match the athlete with the guide runner?
Good question. So, Pat, again, I, as an individual, I can't rely on my wife to be my guide runner all the time because she's got a busy schedule.
Right.
We even have a 14-year-old son that drives us nuts with hockey and all that. So I can't rely on her all the time.
Right.
So I need to rely on some friends. So this is where the guide comes in. And you got to have more than 1, 2, 3. You got to have a handful of guides. And I even tell all our Achilles athletes is that when you're training, try not to train with just one or two guide runners, because when your goal race comes up, they may not be available for you. So the idea is that just like friendship, you got to create some new friendships, spread your wings, and try to have a team of 6, 8, 10 guide runners that you can count on, count on any race day.
Right.
So just like Rhonda Marie said, when, she's got 25 to 50 friends who were helping out do the Bruce Trail run, oftentimes, and it's happened to me a lot of times, we'll show up on race day and we might be short 1 or 2 guides, and we get the announcer or the race director, hey, can you make an announcement to say, we've got this individual that needs a running guide, anyone would like to volunteer? Wow. And you'd be amazed at how many people come to the front to say, hey, I'm willing to help out. And that's how it comes together.
Wow. So we have a question from Nicole. She's wondering, do the guides have to take special training? Which maybe they don't if they're just coming from the announcer.
No, Nicole.
Wow.
Yeah, if I can answer, Nicole, you don't need any special training. The number one thing that I tell all the running guides is communication. You just got to be able to communicate with your disabled athlete. And like I said earlier, I'm not much of a talker, but if you just say, hey, Brian, we are running along the road, and guess what? We're going to be making a right-hand turn in about 100 yards. I'll let you know. And then when the turn comes up, you might want to say, 5, 4, 3, okay, we're turning. And that's all there is to it. So communication is all I say that you need between the guide and the athlete.
And
so Brian, sorry, while I'm available here, I was in and out of that. I apologize, guys. Brian, a lot of the individuals that we have commenting here are out of the States. Now, organization, obviously, there's Achilles Canada. There is the Achilles United States or Achilles America, maybe.
Good question, Pat. I'm not sure where he was going with that. So someone asked about pace. So different runners have different length of legs, and so how do they match pace with you? Because you're an athlete, and maybe they're not such an athlete. Like you said, some of them don't even finish with you. Yeah. How do you like? This is the first time you've ran with them. How do you match pace? Do you slow down for them, or
no? Good question, Pat. So when it comes to matching up, what I always try to do is I always try to ensure that the guide runner is a faster runner than the athlete.
Okay.
So what I always ask for is the guide runner saying, okay, what's your average time to do a 5 and a 10K run? They give me that. And then I match them up with the Achilles athlete. So the idea is to match them up with a person of a similar pace. Okay.
Right.
That way they're both, the athlete and the guide runner are both benefiting by completing the run together. Now, right. When it comes to the marathon, half marathon or more marathon running, I try to ensure that the guide runner is at least 10 minutes faster than the athlete. Why 10 minutes faster? Well, because on any given day, the athlete could be doing super well and feeling really good.
Right.
That, they want to pick it up a bit. And if they want to be able to pick it up a bit, I want to ensure that the guide runner can keep up with them.
Yeah.
So that's why when it comes to a marathon, I always say, make sure your guide runner is at least 10 minutes quicker. In case you're on fire and you can run quicker, you want to make sure that guide runner can keep up with you.
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense. Like I know the few races I've done, I had an idea of how fast I would be because of training and all the stuff you do. But once you're in the race, it's unbelievable how much faster you can go just because you feel good. You've had the right food. You've had the right, training leading up. You've had the rest couple of days. So when you actually hit the pavement, you just fly, and you just don't realize how fast you can go until a race day. And obviously you can't do that all the time. Otherwise you'll hurt yourself. So now would probably be good time to ask if like people watching or are interested in being a guide runner, what's the best way to go about that?
Real simple. The best way is to just get a hold of me. Get a hold of Achilles Canada. Go to our website, achillescanada.ca. My name's on there. My email address is on there. We have an application form, volunteer application form that you can fill out. It will come to me or send me an email. My telephone number is there too. You can pick up the phone and chat with me, and we'll get you started. And I'll put you into our database. And then again, I'll ask you the similar questions in terms of what's your average time to run 5 and 10K? Whereabout do you live? And then I will do our, research with our athletes to see who might be living in your neighborhood, which always makes it easier. And if we have an athlete who's in need of a guide or two that lives in your neighborhood, I will put the two of you in touch. And then hopefully from there you start, running together, get a training program together, and you just take it from there.
Nice. So, while you were talking earlier about 800 athletes are in your group?
Yeah, just under 800 Achilles athletes, but we probably got 1,500 guide runners.
So I have seen athletes with guide ropes, etc., in the Paralympics. Are you part of that as well? And if so, what kind of things are you in with that?
Okay, so I'm not part of the Paralympics.
Right.
Because basically we're just, like your everyday running club in the community. So basically, I would say we're amateur. We're an amateur running club. We just focus on those with the disabilities. So the idea is I want as many people with the disability, regardless of your disability, we all need to stay healthy and fit, right? That's the only way that, we can live longer. And part of that is doing a fitness program. So I focus in on running. Why running? Well, running, if you think about it, is the simplest sport that you can do. Anybody can do it regardless of what your background is, okay? And I'm going to say regardless of your weight, regardless of your sex, your gender, whatever, your disability, everybody can get out there and run. And running, all you need is a good pair of running shoes. You get a good pair of running shoes and you can get out there and run. So that's what we are. But as I was saying earlier, we've had some athletes come through our club and have just done so well that they joined the Paralympic team for Team Canada, representing them, athletic around the world, which is just outstanding.
That's amazing.
So, Brian, while I'm here and I got my daughter up the ladder holding the satellite just in the right position for 10 seconds, how do you guys get funded? Where are you getting your money from? And if she falls off again, I apologize, but she was a gymnast, so hopefully she'll hold up there all right. But how are you guys funded? Am I stuck again? I don't even know anymore.
Pat, I heard you loud and clear. Your daughter's in the roof, so we'll give her the
doing good.
So, how do we get funded? So here we are.
To the left.
How do you get funded, Brian?
All right. So how do we get funded? Again, we're a nonprofit organization. We are registered with CRA here in Canada, registered charity organization. But we don't get any government funding. So no government funding. We have our biggest fundraiser of the year is the Toronto St. Patrick's Day race. So this is the race that we put on every year. We just celebrated our 24th year, and next year being 2024 is our 25th year of the Toronto St. Patrick's Day race. It consists of a 1K kids run, a 5K, and a 10K race. That's the only and biggest fundraiser that we do all year, and all of the funds that we raise from that single race help to support the club, and more importantly, it helps support our Achilles athlete.
So can anyone get involved, or Like,
Yeah.
if someone wants to run in that race, do you sign up like I would the Scotiabank Marathon or?
Yep, you're totally right, James. It's just like any other race. You register online, do the race, and if you're interested in guiding for that race, you send me an email, and if I've got some athletes who are looking for guide runners, I'll match you up as best I can.
Right.
If not, do the race, make a donation. The other thing is that if it's not guide riding, we have a couple of committees. You can always help us out by joining one of our committees, like there's the sponsorship committee, there's the athlete recruitment committee. So there's a number of other things that you can do within our organization.
That's amazing. So Pat, so there is no government funding, and their biggest thing is, you'll love this because you're being Irish yourself. Their biggest is this. So we'll get Pat running this year, the 2025. He's gone again, but 2025. There's the St. Pat 2024. Sorry, 2024 is their 25th race. Math is hard. The 25th race, and they do it on St. Patrick's Day. That's their big race. That's how they raise money, and anyone can do it. And you could run with the kids. So we could get you there. He doesn't run. He makes jokes all the time about how.
Well, she's got to get off the ladder first if I'm going to get
there. That's true. Yeah. No, I think that's wonderful. I think it's inspiring. I love it. Do you have a lot of people on your board? How does the board work? Like, so you're the head of the board, or so how does that board process work?
Sure, I'm the head of the board. We have a small board of directors of 6 individuals that represent right across Canada. So they're well represented with all the provinces. We try to meet 4 times a year. I will admit that since COVID, things have slowed down a bit. So we don't meet as often because of COVID, because as you know, during COVID, everyone got shut down. Yeah. So we had Zoom meetings and so forth, but we try to meet 4 times a year. They're very dedicated, enthusiastic. And again, our biggest fundraiser is the Toronto St. Patrick's Day race. So, we try to do our best to get new sponsors on board and try to get as many people out. At one time, we were the largest 5K race in Toronto. We consistently sell out every year. Our maximum number of runners that we can allow is 1,500. And basically, we stop at 1,500 because of the venue that we use is only capable of holding 1,500 runners. Because as part of your entry fee with the race, you get a free pint of beer, hot bowl of chili. So we always have those 2 items for everyone within our venue.
That's awesome. So we were talking to Ian from the Ottawa Marathon, and he was telling us about some of the costs of putting on something like that. So he was talking about the police and the ambulance services, and they also had a crash hospital, like a actual, like, almost military kind of tent hospital where athletes could get help. Can you go over kind of the costs of what this upcoming marathon? I'm always interested in that. I know Pat is too. He would be on it if he could talk. How does that all work out? Like, there's a lot to, like, when I first did my first run, I thought it was amazing, and I didn't even think about what it went through. But as I do some like runs past that, I think about well, that policeman has to get paid, and that guy holding the barrier, and that volunteer has to be taken care of to make sure he gets enough to drink and eat, and those toilets have to be in the right spot because I'm sure they don't want them on any other lawn. So can you go through a little bit about organizing such an event?
Yeah, James, you're absolutely right. I think you were talking about Ian Fraser from
yes.
Yeah, he's a terrific guy.
Yes.
Yeah, he and I, we know each other well. We often chat and how to help out each other's races and all that. But you're right. It's amazing what the expenses are. I do our 5K, 10K race take place right in the downtown core of Toronto. And it cost us just under $100,000. It's not cheap. We could do our run at a park in Toronto and it would be half the cost, but I'm all about disability. So
right.
Make it accessible to our runners. So we are the largest race in Canada. that showcase individuals with a disability. So as I had mentioned before, we sell out at around 1,500 runners. Roughly between 150 to 200 of those runners are athletes with a disability.
Wow.
So we have our race in the downtown core so that we can take advantage of the TTC subway and the buses. And our race doesn't start till 10:15 in the morning. You'll notice that all the other races in town start at 8, 9 o'clock at the very latest. We are the only race that has a late start. And again, that was something that I had to fight for with the City of Toronto. And again, the main reason is because I want to ensure those who are coming down by TTC that they get there in time, well enough ahead of the start time so that they can get themselves in race modes and all that. And again, it's all about accessibility. So we're the only race in town that has the late start. And again, we're trying to showcase, but it is expensive. No one gives us a break. When it comes to cost, the police, the city, the permit,
Right.
the venue, we get chili for everyone. So the catering, the beer, it's not cheap. And again, since COVID, our prices have gone up. Supplies are hard, t-shirts, medals. So yeah, for a simple little 5K race in downtown Toronto, our expenses are just under $100,000, and it's hard to come by.
That's incredible, like just amazing. So would the $100,000 come from the ticket prices? Like, so when we were talking to Ian, he said that a lot of times, especially right before COVID, by March, which is when, I think Doug Ford said, no, we're closing everything down. He said he had already bought all his medals, all his t-shirts. He had paid some deposits that he couldn't get back and stuff like that. So there's so many upfront costs. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, again, you're absolutely right. COVID hit us in 2020.
Yeah.
So, just as you said, in the month of March. Okay, so our race, we were the very first race that got canceled by the City of Toronto because of COVID. 2 days before my race, we got canceled. So we were told to shut down. We had to shut down. And I had all the runners coming to pre-registration, picking up their shirts. A lot of them were upset because the race got canceled. But what the protocol that we had to, take with the Health Canada. So it was tough. And in the next 2 years, we had to go virtual, and, there was no revenue to be made. But t-shirts and medals are a huge cost for everyone. Again, when it comes to running, everyone doing a race, they expect something at the finish line. And a lot of runners expect a t-shirt or a medal. So that's what we do. So with COVID, and again, since COVID, our supplies have just dwindled to nothing. And it's very hard to get shirts and medals in large quantities. And again, we do our best, but we rely on sponsorship. So sponsorship is a big component of our race, and it's the sponsorship that covers, well, hopefully, in a perfect world, you want to get enough sponsorship dollars in to cover all your expenses so that everyone who paid their entry fee, that's the so-called revenue or gravy that the race directors or the organization will get the benefit from.
Nice.
So how many units would you go through there? Like, what would you need for t-shirts? What would you need for medals? How many of those units would you go through in a race in a year? What would that look like for you, Brian? While I'm still alive.
Okay, while you're still alive, with our race, because we sell out of 1,500, we got to sell 1,500 shirts. So it's 1,500 shirts that we order and 1,500 medals. Doesn't sound like a lot, if you ask Ian's numbers, they're probably like 20,000 shirts and 20,000 medals. It's a huge cost, but you got to do it because that's what the runners expect at the finish line.
Right.
So the virtual race you mentioned, it's difficult. Like talking to Ian, he was talking about it. It was difficult just for that, but you have COVID, and you're not allowed to be with someone. So how do you get a guide runner when you're not allowed to be near someone else? So how do you do a virtual race like that?
Well, again, James, that's a very good point. During our virtual races for the Achilles athlete and the guide runner, they had to end up being, almost like family members or very close friends. So as you know, during COVID, even though you're not, you weren't supposed to socialize, you had that small little group that was
the bubble, I think it was called.
The bubble.
Yeah.
That in your little bubble. So if you had a friend or two that were considered your bubble friend, hopefully they were one of your guide runners to help out with the virtual race or your training during COVID. It did shut down. Even with Achilles here, we had running group 3 times a week. They all got shut down. We couldn't even run. So what I started doing was we just had Zoom meetings. So once a week, we would have a Zoom meeting, and the idea of the Zoom meeting was just to bring everyone together, and especially those with a disability. Oftentimes a lot of them live on their own. Their network of friends and family may not be the best. It's hard to get out. So we became their family through the Zoom. So the idea of the Zoom was, okay, we aren't running today, but hey, how are you feeling today? How was your week? Tell us basically how you're feeling. And that's where the mental issues came in. A lot of them were suffering from depression. Hey, I can't go out. I can't meet, have a coffee with a friend or two. So depression was very big during the COVID time with a lot of our athletes.
Well, so Brian, a lot of our guests here that are throwing in for questions are out of the United States. And a lot of them are out of Texas, Florida. We got, California, some of these areas now. And they just didn't have the restrictions that we did by any means. And, when we kind of, there's a comment here, COVID, right? And, here we are 3 years later still talking about it. But Canada, we handled it in a very different way than a lot of our neighbors to the south did. And someone with a disability in need, can you talk to some of the experiences of those people and kind of the emotional stories that go along with that?
Well, again, good question. Again, Patrick, I think during COVID, I don't know how quite to describe it, but because here in Canada, everything got shut down. It got shut down to the point where you weren't even, you were told not even to go outside and meet with friends. Like you couldn't even do that. Even wearing a mask at the time, you were kind of told not to do that. Mm-hmm. Those with the disability, it's just that much harder than an able-bodied. We can't just walk outside and go shopping. Like in order for us to go shopping, we got to plan it. It's a planned trip. Even myself, if you look at me and you say, God, the guy looks normal. Like, what's his disability? Well, believe it or not, I'm legally blind. I use a cane to get around. But when I need to go shopping, I got to plan when I'm going, what time I'm going, what route am I taking, just so that I know all the hurdles that I could encounter. Right. So during COVID, that was really tough. And I think it kind of scared a lot of people with disability that they just stayed inside. And you know what? We're all human. We can only stay inside for so long before we need to get out there and connect with someone live. And connecting is not the same with just picking up the phone or sending an email to a friend to say, hi, how you doing? It's not the same. You need that face-to-face interaction and live voice. And, we weren't allowed to do it. And I can tell you with a lot of people who I know within our club, depression was probably the number one thing that came up during COVID. Yeah. People were just getting depressed, and it's like, okay, so how do I get you out of, depression? It's hard. So this is why we came up with the Zoom meeting once a week. And we were just hopeful that, okay, we'll come on to Zoom. And we were having like phenomenal numbers. We started off small, half a dozen to a dozen people. But by the end of the first year, we were getting over 100 people on the Zoom. And it just started up a whole conversation. Okay, let's start chatting. And people would talk about the weather, what it was like in your neighborhood, and, were you able to get out for a run, and, what can we do? And oftentimes it's just talking to someone, you kind of share your frustration, and that would kind of hopefully alleviate some of the depression that you might be suffering from.
That's amazing. Just to come up with that is amazing. Like, there were a lot of people that that felt isolated, that were trapped and couldn't get out. I live alone. No, I know not the same thing. I live alone, so although I had to keep going to work because both my jobs are those type of jobs that I still went to work. But it was a ghost town. There was no one around. I had very few conversations. Most of my conversations were like with my kids through Zoom, like you said, because I couldn't see them in person because they both live farther away. But I couldn't imagine adding to that, not being able to see or having a physical disability, especially when you add the directions in stores. Like, so they were like, you can't come in this door. You can only go out that door. You have to go down the aisle this way. Like, it was hard enough for me. There were quite a few times I was going the wrong way down the aisle. Our American guests might not realize this, but we actually had little arrows painted on the floor, and you had to go that way. Otherwise, people yelled at you. They got very serious and very mad if you were walking down the wrong way down the aisle. So how did you, if you don't mind me asking, how did you navigate that?
Well, again, I might be lucky because I had my wife who was in my bubble.
Right.
So he and I would go shopping together. But you know what? You're absolutely right. There were so many rules that we had to follow going shopping. And, again, the arrows, I never saw the arrows on the floor. So if I was out on my own, I would have to ask one of the store clerks, for example, hey, can you just help me out here? Because I'm not too sure what direction I need to go, but this is what I'm looking for. And, take it from there. I also wanted to say that during COVID, all my life, I've been into sports and recreation. I worked for an organization and my job was sports and recreation. And my job was to get those with the disability off the couch. I'm not talking about Achilles. I'm talking about another organization. Okay. And during COVID, I actually got let go. I agree with the company. They let me go because I was their person for sports and recreation, of which completely got shut down. But it was devastating to me because, I relied on that job for my salary to pay all my bills. And ever since then, it has been a struggle. Even though we are out of COVID, it has been a struggle for me to get back into the workforce full time, looking for that, magical or right job that just fits me. It has been tough.
Well, I think, Brian, that there's a lot to be said there. And I tend to look at things from kind of macroeconomic stuff. And I try to talk with people about, James talks about getting their mind, body, and spirit kind of right. And I talk about that you've got to be able to do that with your finances as well. And COVID devastated families. Like, we're going through a process right now. I know that our folks down in the States are dealing with it as well, with the inflation. Costs of living, costs of goods being sold are increasing exponentially. And we're just not getting that break. And, someone in your position where you're doing all these amazing things for other people, to then have to be sitting there and going, it's like, okay, so what's next for me? Right? In our country, in Canada, I look at that's crazy to me. That's crazy because you're out there touching people's lives, doing beautiful things every day. And, you might get some people out here that are chatting that might have something really cool for you, whether that's, another nonprofit. We'll find you some work, I'm sure, doing something that'd be fantastic. But what kind of field do you see yourself in? Like, obviously helping people is a passion of yours. Do you think that in that kind of line, that recreation and health and wellness type stuff?
Well, since COVID, I've opened up completely. So I'm, again, I'm a passionate person. I love inspiring people. I love advocating for people, with those with a disability. we've come a long way breaking down barriers for those with a disability, but there's so much more that needs to be done.
Right.
And again, the only way I feel that it can get done is that you need someone with, a big voice. And it's not just one person. You need a team of people with a huge voice that are going to make a difference, bring the issue to the forefront, whether going to media or whatever, and informing, the general public. Hey, we've got this group of individuals who are still struggling. We need to help them out. And, sometimes, like, if I just talk about myself as an example, like I've been out of work full time for the last couple of years because of COVID. And the hiring process nowadays is all online.
Yeah.
And, just reading my cover letter and my resume does not tell you who I really am.
Right.
And I often ask, and I don't understand why, is that, just give me the opportunity to speak with you.
Yeah.
I think would go so much further. And, again, just trying to break that down for an individual with a disability just seems to be impossible for me. I just don't understand why corporations nowadays will not open up a little bit. They say they want to hire more people with disabilities, which is true. You gotta, but I just don't see it out there. Like they're talking the talk, but they aren't walking or doing the business of actually giving those with a disability a chance. And I don't think those with a disability can get it correct through a cover letter or a resume. We need the actual interaction with the recruiter or the HR department so that he or she can really find out who we are and if we're capable for the job. And we're not going to be capable for all jobs, but that's the only way I see it working the best.
Are there any organizations out there in Canada that help people with disabilities, link them up with businesses like we do? So there are like employment agencies that I can go into that help me like find a job. Are there that would help you like maybe send a video or like, are there organizations like that or?
Okay, so good question. So yes and no. There are organizations out there that will help those with a disability get a job. I don't know how to say this politically correct.
Then don't. Welcome to Soaring Profits, where we don't have to be that.
I just find that a lot of those organizations that are willing to help, they get you what I call entry-level job. Okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Entry-level job for the younger generation of those with a disability.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm in the older generation. So because I'm in the older generation, I've got tons of knowledge and experience over, working X number of years. And those jobs, that's the job that I need. So I'll be right up front. Like I'm a project manager. So trying to get a bit of a high level position for an individual with a disability is even that much tougher. Sure, I get an entry level job, but like that's just, I'm too advanced for that.
Right. Yeah. No, so Brian, the individuals that we have kind of following us today, a lot of these individuals are, some of them are talking about, I was a single mother, I was at home trying to figure out what was next for me, applying jobs, that sort of thing. And then I built something myself. If Brian McLean was going to go out and build something tomorrow, what would it be? If money wasn't an issue, if time wasn't an issue, what is Brian McLean's dream gig starting on Monday with all the money in the world? Here's the interview question.
Well,
tough question.
You know what? I'd love to stay with the sport of running. I have a huge passion for running, and I would love to get more people with disability out and running. So that would be, number one. Number two is an advocate. I would love to be that voice that represents our community of those with a disability, going to knock on the doors on government and corporate, large corporations to say, hey, guys, I've got this individual over here who is highly qualified. Just give him or her a chance to speak with you and get the foot in the door and, take it from there. So I'd like to advocate breaking down barriers as much as we can. Like I said earlier, we have come a long way, but not far enough. We got to do more.
So we got a question here. It says, have you applied to outside of Canada? There are multinational companies that are a little bit maybe more diverse in their hiring practices that would be looking at that. Have you had a chance to maybe apply outside of Canada?
I'll be honest with that individual. The answer is no. I have not applied outside of Canada because, I have a family here. We're set here. Yeah. I'll be honest with you. I don't want to leave the city of Toronto. I want to, I'm not in that position to move to another country or another province or anything. I got a 14-year-old son who played competitive hockey and starting high school next year. He doesn't want to move. He doesn't want to leave his friends. I totally get it. My wife is here. We're happy here. This is where we want to stay in Toronto.
Yeah, no, for sure. And again, we've had a few individuals on that have worked within their own communities and their own organizations. We had James, what was her name out of Montreal?
Oh, that was, I don't remember her name.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's been a minute. But they had an organization that was pairing artistic individuals in the deaf-blind community. He's working on it over there. He'll get back to me in the next month. But in the deaf-blind community, where they were with sign language translators. So these translators could be all over the world. They could do it from anywhere. They're doing Zoom type things. We're communicating easily through that. But they're trying to do the advocacy type piece. And that's where, Brian, I think your skill set would be a beautiful, like hand in glove type marriage for that type of process. You're literally running Achilles Canada that is taking thousands of people, marrying them, literally marrying them in some cases, but putting them together with other individuals of their community. I think you got to tell people that you're looking. I think you got to get out there and you push people and be like, hey, Brian McLean is looking for something. What can we do for you? And I think you'll find something. I know that you're looking for that high level type thing, but I think when people start realizing what you've built, Achilles Canada, and then going back to the Terry Fox Foundation, where that comes from and where that build off, these are institutions in our country. The fact that you're having trouble, very disheartening, to be honest with you, that struggling to find those, upper management type positions. That's tricky.
I appreciate your advice, and you're certainly lighting a fire under my behind, and I like it. I'll take you up on it, Patrick, for sure.
Sounds good. Well, you might get some feedback from some of these folks here today in the comments. You might get some information over the next couple of days as we roll back through this video. But no, Brian, I think it's fantastic what you do. You clearly have a passion for helping people, and that authenticity that you come with is not all that authentic all the time. And what you've built, what you continue to do for people, I've had the pleasure of interviewing people that you've truly helped. When you're running hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles like Rhonda Marie did, and would have never in a million years been able to do that without Brian McLean and his organization that has married people together to make that happen, there's a special place for you, pal. And I'm sorry that you're having that tough time trying to figure out what's next, but I know you will, because you've got that skill set. And just keep doing what you're doing and supporting the Canadian citizens with disabilities that you are. So I very much appreciate what you're doing. And again, I thank you for coming on tonight.
Thank you, Patrick and James. It was a pleasure. I didn't expect this, but this has just been fantastic. So I've had a great time chatting with you both.
Awesome.
I completely agree, Brian. It's been amazing having you on. Your wealth of information. You're a wonderful man. I am all about helping people out. And if you can just help one person each day to change their lives, it not only raises you up, but it just makes the world a better place. And Brian, you're helping 800 people a day. So what you're doing is inspirational. amazing and wonderful. And I am just privileged to have met you. There's a lot of comments in that we got about how inspirational you are, and you're a wonderful man. I hope someone seeing this reaches out to you, maybe with some way, a link to find a good job that obviously you deserve. So here we are, we're wrapping up at the end here. And Brian, this is the only time that we kind of do something a little bit offside here. So I'm going to talk for a little bit, and then I have a saying at the end. I always say, let's heal our minds, bodies, and souls together. Pat has his saying. He's going to have his little talk, and then it's you. And then you get to tell us whatever you want, and then give us a little inspirational quote, a little saying, a little, don't eat at McDonald's. That's my favorite. Whatever you want. So next week, folks, out there, we have the wonderful Michael. Most of the people that are writing comments know him because he does the Hounds of Business Happy Hour, which both Pat and I have been happy enough to been a part of. It's always a fun, informational chat podcast. And he's going to come on and talk to us about what he does and what who he is. And I hear maybe some of the comments here, maybe he's not as politically correct either as us. So we'll probably get along great once we start chatting. I haven't had the chance to chat with him, but I look forward to that next Thursday. Brian, I really appreciate you coming on. I can't say enough great things about you. When we talked to Rhonda, and she just gushed about how inspirational and how much you help the world, and then to find out that you're indirect links to Terry Fox, one of the heroes of Canada. Just amazing stories. And I hope that you keep on keeping on. And if there's anything we can do, I can't think of anything Soaring Profits could do for you now, but if there is anything, you reach out to us, because I would love to be able to help your organization, because I think it's super important and I think it's wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on. Folks out there, if you can help Brian, easy to contact him, to go to achillescanada.ca. For God's sake, he's even giving you his phone number. So reach out to him, please. If a job connection even, but if you want to get out there and you want to run, you want to help people run, you want to be a guided runner, or if you yourself, you're in the house right now and maybe you have a disability and you haven't thought about it. He just said, walk. You don't have to do much to be a part of this great organization. And Brian there, this wonderful man, will link you up with someone, and you'll be able to get out and maybe raise yourself up a little bit higher. And, being alone is a tough thing. So I encourage you to reach out to Brian and to get out there, get support, and start doing some things. Guys out there, I can't tell you, I'm a runner myself. I just can't imagine it. I could not imagine running these races I've been in with hundreds of people surrounded. You're sardine, you can barely move. And the fear I would have not being able to see. Brian, you're an inspiration to me, and I am so glad to have met you. Profiteers out there, let's heal our minds, bodies, and souls together. Pat?
Well, Brian, I won't take much of your time. I kind of said what I already think about you. And like James had said, it's a pretty inspirational journey. And talking to the people that you've touched along the way, I appreciate what you do. As for all the hounds out there that were commenting in the chats here today, thank you so much. We appreciate you guys, your support for this channel as we're starting to grow it, getting some traction. We appreciate all of you. Mike, we'll see you next week, pal. And Brian, this is where we stick you with the last word. But from me, let's make some money together, folks. Brian, take it home, pal.
All right. Again, thank you, James and Pat. Phenomenal hour together. This was truly amazing. I had a great time. I look forward to keeping up a new friendship with you both. And if I could leave anyone out there, if you got a disability, there's no excuse. Get off the couch, get out of the house. You need a little helping hand. We all do. Reach out to me or reach out to your friends and family. And if you got a passion, it doesn't have to be running. Like I said earlier, I'm into hockey. I still play blind hockey every year. So I love it. I will not stop participating in sports. And I expect the same with you. If you have a disability, there's no reason to stop. We can just make some small changes, small accommodation to keep you involved and make new friends and take it from there. If you're able-bodied, we are looking for running guide, volunteers, sponsorship. Again, just reach out to us, and we'd be more than happy to work with you, see what we can do together. And that's all I can say. So again, to everyone, I thank everyone for your time. Stay positive. Keep motivated. For those who don't know, this week is actually Global Running Week. So Global Running Week, what's the purpose of it? To get everybody outside running. So I'll leave it at that.
That's wonderful. Everyone out there, get on running, just like Brian said. We'll see you next week.